The thunder of hooves and gunshots echoed across the open plain as Rebecca Anderson raced toward the horizon, her heart pounding in rhythm with her horse's gallop. It was 1878 in the Colorado Territory, and she had less than an hour before the men who had murdered her father would discover she had taken the one thing they wanted most, the deed to the largest silver mine in the territory, now safely tucked in her saddlebag. Rebecca glanced over her shoulder, her chestnut hair whipping across her face. No sign of pursuit yet, but they would come. They always came. She had been running for 3 days now, stopping only long enough to rest her horse and catch a few moments of fitful sleep. The journey had been brutal. Her supplies were dwindling, and the unforgiving summer heat made each mile more punishing than the last. Her mare, Willow, was strong but showing signs of fatigue. Rebecca patted the horse's neck reassuringly. "Just a little further, girl," she whispered. "We'll find somewhere safe soon." As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the dusty landscape, Rebecca spotted the faint outline of a town in the distance. Hope surged through her weary body. Perhaps there she could find a room for the night, a proper meal, and maybe even the law, though she'd learned the hard way that badges could be bought as easily as whiskey in these parts. Sweetwater appeared to be like any other frontier town, a main street lined with wooden buildings, hitching posts, and townsfolk going about their business as dusk approached. Rebecca guided Willow toward what appeared to be a modest hotel. She needed rest desperately, and the mare needed water and grain. As she dismounted in front of the hotel, Rebecca's legs nearly buckled beneath her. 3 days in the saddle had taken their toll. She steadied herself against Willow, then reached for her saddlebag. The valuable papers inside were worth dying for. Her father already had. "Need some help with that, miss?" A gruff voice startled her. Rebecca turned to find 3 men watching her with predatory eyes. Their clothes were trail-worn and dusty, and each man wore a gun on his hip with the casual comfort of someone accustomed to using it. "No, thank you," she replied firmly, clutching the saddlebag to her chest. "I can manage." The tallest of the 3 stepped forward, pushing his hat back to reveal a face marked by a jagged scar running from his temple to his jaw. "Mighty heavy bag for such a delicate lady. Why don't you let me carry that for you?" Rebecca stepped backward, her spine pressed against Willow's flank. "I said I can manage." The man's friendly facade dropped. "I don't think you understand, miss. That bag, hand it over." "I will do no such thing," Rebecca declared, though fear made her voice quaver. The scarred man's hand moved to his holster. "I ain't asking again. You'll leave the lady be." The voice was quiet but carried an undeniable authority. All eyes turned to the source. He stood in the middle of the street, tall and imposing in a dust-covered duster coat. His face was partially shadowed by his hat, but Rebecca could make out a strong jawline dusted with several days' worth of stubble. One hand rested casually on his gun belt, the other held the reins of a magnificent black stallion. "This ain't your business, stranger," the scarred man growled. "I'm making it my business." The newcomer stepped closer, and Rebecca saw his eyes piercing blue and unflinching. "3 men threatening 1 woman doesn't sit right with me. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" the second outlaw snarled. "Don't much care." The stranger's gaze never wavered. "Last chance. Walk away." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then the scarred man lunged for his gun. The stranger's draw was lightning fast, almost too quick for Rebecca to follow. A single shot rang out, and the scarred man howled, clutching his hand where the bullet had grazed it. "Next one goes through something you'll miss more," the stranger said evenly. "Now go." The 3 men retreated, the scarred one spitting curses as they disappeared down an alley. Rebecca released the breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Thank you, sir." The stranger approached, leading his horse. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 30, with the weathered look of someone who spent most of his life outdoors. "Patrick Turner," he introduced himself, tipping his hat. "You all right, madam?" Rebecca Anderson, she replied, surprised by the sudden flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with her recent danger. And yes, thanks to you. Patrick glanced at the saddlebag she still clutched tightly. Those men might come back, with friends. Whatever you've got in that bag seems mighty important to them. It is. Rebecca hesitated, unsure how much to trust this stranger who had just saved her. It belonged to my father. Patrick nodded, seeming to understand her reluctance to elaborate. You need a safe place to stay tonight. This hotel isn't it, not anymore. I don't have many options, Mr. Turner. I know somewhere. He mounted his horse in one fluid motion, then extended his hand to her. If you're willing to trust me. Rebecca hesitated only briefly before securing her saddlebag and climbing back onto Willow. Lead the way, Mr. Turner. Patrick guided them away from the main street, taking winding paths through the outskirts of town until they reached a modest cabin nestled among a stand of cottonwood trees. A small corral stood beside it, empty but well-maintained. My sister's place, Patrick explained as he dismounted. She's away visiting family in Denver. No one in town knows I use it when I'm passing through. Rebecca followed him inside, where he quickly lit a lamp. The cabin was simple but clean, with a small kitchen area, a table with 2 chairs, and a curtained-off sleeping space. You can take the bed, Patrick said, gesturing to the curtain. I'll keep watch from the porch. Rebecca set her saddlebag on the table. Those men. They'll keep looking for me, won't they? Patrick nodded grimly. Depends on what you've got that they want so badly. Taking a deep breath, Rebecca opened the saddlebag and withdrew a leather folder. The deed to the Silver Creek mine. My father discovered it last year. It's the richest silver deposit in the territory. Patrick's eyebrows rose. And those men, they murdered my father 3 days ago trying to get their hands on this. Her voice cracked slightly. I took it and ran. They've been after me since. I'm sorry about your father, Patrick said quietly. There was genuine sympathy in his eyes. Get some rest, Miss Anderson. We'll figure things out in the morning. Rebecca was too exhausted to argue. She disappeared behind the curtain, but not before saying, It's Rebecca. And thank you again, Mr. Turner. Patrick, he corrected with a small smile. Just Patrick. Morning came with golden light filtering through the cabin's small windows. Rebecca awoke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the events of the previous day came rushing back. She dressed quickly and pulled back the curtain to find Patrick at the stove, cooking what smelled like breakfast. Morning, he said without turning around. Coffee's ready if you want some. Rebecca poured herself a cup, surprised by the domesticity of the scene. Have you been up long? Most of the night. He slid a plate of eggs and bacon toward her. Eat, we need to talk about what happens next. They sat at the table and Rebecca studied him in the morning light. His face was handsome in a rugged way, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though he wasn't smiling now. His hands were calloused, strong, a working man's hands. Who are you, really? She asked suddenly. You handled those men like you've done it before. Patrick took a long sip of coffee before answering. I was a lawman, Texas Ranger, not anymore. What happened? A shadow passed over his face. Lost my partner to an ambush. Found out later it was an inside job. Someone in our own ranks sold us out. I couldn't stay after that. So now you're what? A drifter? Sometimes. Bounty hunter sometimes. I track people who need finding. He set his cup down. Your turn. Tell me about this mine and the men after you. Rebecca sighed, pushing her plate away. My father was a geologist. He came out west to survey for the railroad but discovered the silver deposit on his own time, filed the claim legally, started a small operation. Then the Blackburn Gang got wind of it. Blackburn? Patrick's expression darkened. Ezra Blackburn, you know him, by reputation. Mean as a rattlesnake and twice as dangerous. He's wanted in 4 territories. Rebecca nodded. They approached my father, offered to partner with him. When he refused, they threatened him. He sent me to Denver for safety, but I came back when I stopped receiving his letters. I found him. Her voice faltered. They'd shot him. The house was ransacked, but I knew where he kept the deed hidden. Patrick reached across the table, his hand covering hers briefly. "And now Blackburn's men are after you." The scarred man, that was Sela's deacon, Blackburn's right hand. Rebecca shuddered at the memory. "I didn't recognize the others." Patrick stood abruptly. "Finish your breakfast. I need to check on something in town." "You're leaving?" Panic edged into her voice. "Just for an hour. Bar your door. Don't open it for anyone but me." He strapped on his gun belt. "Do you have a weapon?" Rebecca retrieved a small derringer from her skirt pocket. "My father insisted I learn to use it." Patrick nodded approvingly. "Good, I'll be back soon." After he left, Rebecca paced the small cabin anxiously. She had trusted Patrick instinctively, but now doubt crept in. What if he was working for Blackburn too? What if he'd gone to tell them where she was? She was gathering her things to flee when the door opened, and Patrick returned, his expression grim. "We need to move," he said without preamble. Blackburn himself arrived in town this morning with 6 more men. They're searching every building. Relief that Patrick had returned was quickly replaced by fear. "Where can we go?" "I have a plan." Patrick began gathering supplies. "There's a federal marshal in Junction City, 3 days' ride from here. He's a good man, one I trust. He can help you file the deed properly and provide protection until Blackburn is dealt with." Rebecca hesitated. "Why are you helping me? You don't know me." Patrick paused, looking at her with those intense blue eyes. "Maybe I'm tired of men like Blackburn taking whatever they want without consequence." He continued packing. "Or maybe there's something about a brave woman standing her ground that I can't walk away from." They slipped out of town as the sun reached its zenith, taking a little-used trail that Patrick assured her would be harder to track. They rode in silence for hours, Rebecca lost in thought about the strange turn her life had taken. A week ago, she had been a geology professor's daughter with a comfortable life in Denver. Now she was a fugitive, her father was dead, and her only ally was a former Texas Ranger with secrets of his own. As dusk approached, Patrick guided them into a sheltered canyon where a small stream provided fresh water. "We'll camp here tonight," he said, helping Rebecca dismount. "Should be safe enough." They worked together setting up Camp Patrick, building a small, nearly smokeless fire while Rebecca prepared a simple meal from their provisions. The domesticity of the situation struck her again, how natural it felt to work alongside this man she barely knew. "How did you become a Texas Ranger?" she asked as they ate. Patrick looked into the fire, memories playing across his features. "My father was one. He was killed when I was 16. Outlaws shot him in the back during a bank robbery." His jaw tightened. "I joined up the day I turned 18, determined to be just like him." "And were you, like him?" A small smile touched his lips. "No, he was better, wiser. He understood that the badge was about protecting people, not hunting bad men." Patrick's gaze met hers. "Took me longer to learn that lesson." Rebecca found herself wanting to reach out to him to ease the old pain she saw in his eyes. Instead, she asked, "Do you have any family left?" "Just my sister in Denver, Sarah. She's married to a banker there." His expression softened. "She's always trying to get me to settle down, find a nice girl, stop chasing trouble." "Why haven't you?" The question slipped out before Rebecca could stop it. Patrick's eyes found hers across the fire. "Never found a reason compelling enough, I suppose." The intensity of his gaze made her heartbeat quicken. Rebecca looked away first, suddenly very aware of how alone they were beneath the vast starry sky. "We should get some rest," Patrick said, his voice low. "Long ride tomorrow." Rebecca nodded, retreating to her bedroll. But sleep eluded her as she lay listening to the night sounds and the occasional shifting of their horses. A few feet away, she could hear Patrick's steady breathing and wondered if he was truly asleep, or like her, lying awake with thoughts too numerous to settle. Dawn broke with a chill in the air. They ate quickly, packed up camp, and were back on the trail as the sun crested the eastern mountains. Patrick seemed more vigilant than the day before, frequently checking their back trail and keeping them to rocky ground where possible. "You think they're following us?" Rebecca asked as they paused to rest the horses at midday. "I'd be surprised if they weren't," Patrick replied, scanning the horizon. "Blackburn isn't a man who gives up easily. Tell me about this marshal we're going to see." James Cooper. "We served together in Texas before he took the federal badge. He's straight as an arrow, can't be bought." Patrick handed her his canteen. "If anyone can help you legally secure that mine and bring Blackburn to justice, it's Cooper." Rebecca took a drink, then asked the question that had been weighing on her. "And after that, what will you do?" Patrick looked at her for a long moment. "I haven't thought that far ahead." Before she could press further, a distant sound caught his attention. Patrick tensed, then quickly moved to help her mount. "Riders coming. Could be nothing, but I'd rather not find out the hard way." They pushed hard through the afternoon, the beautiful but unforgiving landscape of mesas and canyons passing in a blur. By evening, both horses and riders were exhausted, but Patrick insisted they continue until well after nightfall. Finally, they made camp in a dense grove of pine trees that offered concealment from prying eyes. Too tired for conversation, they ate cold rations and settled into their bedrolls without ceremony. Rebecca was drifting into sleep when a hand gently covered her mouth. Her eyes flew open to find Patrick leaning over her, a finger to his lips. He removed his hand and whispered, "Riders, stay here. Don't move." He slipped away silently into the darkness, gun drawn. Rebecca's heart hammered in her chest as she strained to hear. Minutes passed like hours. Then came the unmistakable sound of voices, men's voices not far from their camp. "Tracks ended at the creek," one was saying. "They can't have gone far," another replied. "Blackburn wants that woman and the deed by tomorrow, or our hides won't be worth a damn." "Split up. 2 go north, 2 south along the creek. They have to water those horses somewhere." Rebecca held her breath as the voices faded, the men apparently moving on. Still, Patrick didn't return. The minutes stretched into an agonizing half-hour before she heard a twig snap nearby. She reached for her derringer, aiming it toward the sound. "It's me," came Patrick's whispered voice before he materialized from the darkness. "Put that away before you shoot me." Relief flooded through her. "Did they see you?" "No, they've split up to search, but they're looking in the wrong direction." He knelt beside her. "We need to move now while they're scattered. Can you ride?" Rebecca nodded, quickly gathering her things. Within minutes, they were mounted and moving through the darkness, Patrick leading them on a route that seemed impossible to navigate without daylight. Yet he moved with confidence, as if the stars themselves were guiding him. They rode through the night, stopping only when the horses needed rest. As dawn approached, they found themselves in a narrow pass between towering rock formations. "Junction City is on the other side of these mountains," Patrick told her. "If we push hard, we can be there by nightfall." The path grew steeper and more treacherous as they ascended. In places, they had to dismount and lead the horses over particularly difficult terrain. By midday, they had reached the summit and could see the vast expanse of valley beyond, with the faint outline of a town in the far distance. "There it is," Patrick said, a hint of relief in his voice. "We made it." As they began their descent, a shot rang out, the bullet striking the rock wall near Patrick's head. He reacted instantly, pulling Rebecca behind a boulder for cover as more shots followed. "Damn it. They must have guessed where we were headed and cut around us," Patrick growled, drawing his pistol. He peered around the edge of the boulder, then quickly pulled back as another bullet ricocheted nearby. "I count 3 of them positioned among those rocks up there," he said, indicating a spot further up the pass. "They've got the high ground." "What do we do?" Rebecca asked, clutching her derringer. Patrick's eyes scanned their surroundings, calculating. "There's a narrow trail down there that branches off this main path. If we can reach it, we might be able to lose them in the descent." He looked at her intently. "But we'll have to make a run for it. When I give the word, mount up and ride hard. Don't stop for anything." Rebecca nodded, her mouth dry with fear. Patrick fired several shots toward their attackers, forcing them to take cover. "Now," he shouted. They ran to their horses, mounting quickly. Patrick fired 2 more shots, then spurred his stallion forward. Rebecca followed close behind. bullets kicking up dust around them as they galloped down the path. The trail Patrick had spotted was barely visible, a thin line winding down the mountainside through dense brush and rocks. They plunged down it recklessly, the horses struggling to maintain their footing on the steep descent. Behind them, they could hear their pursuers shouting and the sounds of pursuit. The trail grew narrower, forcing them to slow. Patrick glanced back anxiously. "They're still coming," he said grimly. "We need to find somewhere to make a stand." As if in answer to his words, the trail curved sharply and opened into a small box canyon with sheer walls on 3 sides. A thin waterfall cascaded down one wall, creating a small pool. "This will have to do," Patrick said, dismounting and leading his horse behind a large boulder. "Get down and find cover." Rebecca followed his lead, her hands trembling as she tied Willow's reins to a scrub pine. "We're trapped here," she whispered. "Maybe," Patrick admitted, checking his ammunition, "but so are they if they follow us in." "How's your aim with that derringer?" "Good at close range," she replied. "My father made sure of that." Patrick gave her a quick smile. "Sounds like a smart man. I wish I could have met him." The compliment warmed her despite their dire situation. "He would have liked you," she said softly. Their eyes met for a moment, and Rebecca felt something pass between them, an unspoken connection that transcended their brief acquaintance. Then the moment was broken by the sound of approaching horses. "Here they come," Patrick murmured, positioning himself behind the boulder. "Stay down until I tell you." 3 riders appeared at the entrance to the canyon, advancing cautiously with weapons drawn. Rebecca recognized Silas Deacon, his scarred face twisted in a malevolent grin. "We know you're in here, Turner," Deacon called out. "Give us the woman and the deed, and maybe we'll let you walk away." "That's mighty generous of you, Deacon," Patrick called back, "but I'm going to have to decline." "You're outnumbered and outgunned. Don't be a fool." "Wouldn't be the first time I've been called that." Patrick glanced at Rebecca. "When I start shooting, make your way to that crevice in the wall. It looks deep enough to provide cover." Rebecca nodded, gathering her courage. Patrick fired suddenly, his first shot catching one of Deacon's companions in the shoulder. The man cried out, dropping his gun. The canyon erupted in gunfire as Deacon and the other outlaw returned fire, bullets splintering rock and kicking up dust all around them. Rebecca ran for the crevice Patrick had indicated, pressing herself into its shadows. From her position, she could see Patrick exchange fire with the outlaws, who had taken cover behind rocks at the canyon entrance. The gunfight seemed to stretch on forever. Rebecca watched in horror as a bullet grazed Patrick's arm, tearing his sleeve and drawing blood. He hardly seemed to notice, continuing to fire with deadly accuracy. One of the outlaws made a break for better cover, exposing himself momentarily. Patrick didn't miss the opportunity, his bullet finding its mark. The man fell and didn't move again. Now it was 2 against 2. Deacon and his remaining companion grew more cautious, their shots more deliberate. Patrick was pinned down, unable to move from his position without exposing himself to their fire. Rebecca realized with sudden clarity that they needed to change the odds. Her derringer was short range, but if she could get closer without being seen. The small waterfall had created a series of wet rocks that led to a position that would put her behind and above the outlaws. It was risky, but possible. Without telling Patrick her plan, knowing he would forbid it, Rebecca began to edge out of the crevice, staying low and using the canyon's natural features for cover. The gunfire provided audio cover for her movements as she made her way toward the waterfall. The ascent was treacherous, the rocks slippery under her hands and feet. Twice she nearly fell, catching herself just in time. Finally, she reached a position directly above and behind Deacon and his companion, who remained focused on Patrick's position. Taking a deep breath, Rebecca aimed her derringer at the outlaw nearest to her and fired. The shot caught him in the back and he crumpled with a cry of surprise. Deacon whirled, firing wildly in her direction. She pressed herself flat against the rock as bullets ricocheted around her. "Rebecca!" Patrick shouted, genuine fear in his voice. Seizing the distraction Rebecca had created, Patrick broke from cover and fired twice in quick succession. Deacon jerked as both bullets found their mark, then fell face forward into the dust. For a moment, silence reigned in the canyon. Then Patrick was running toward the rocks where Rebecca clung, his face ashen. "Rebecca, are you hit?" "No," she called down shakily. "I'm all right." Patrick helped her descend, his hands strong and sure on her waist as he lifted her down the final few feet. Before she could catch her breath, he pulled her into a fierce embrace. "Don't ever do anything that foolish again," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Then, more softly, "You could have been killed." Rebecca pulled back slightly to look at him, suddenly aware of how close they were, of his arms still around her. "I couldn't just hide and watch you fight alone." Something changed in Patrick's eyes, a softening, a recognition. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his head and kissed her. The world seemed to stop. Rebecca had been kissed before, polite society kisses from earnest young men in Denver. Nothing like this connection that seemed to reach beyond the physical and touch something deep within her soul. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. Patrick rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed. "I shouldn't have done that," he murmured. "Why not?" Rebecca challenged softly, his eyes opened, meeting hers. "Because now I'm not sure I can let you go when this is over." The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Before Rebecca could respond, the sound of approaching horses broke the moment. Patrick stepped back, drawing his gun again. "Get behind me!" But the riders who appeared at the canyon entrance weren't Blackburn's men. They wore badges, a group of lawmen led by a distinguished man with silver at his temples. "Cooper," Patrick called out cautiously. "Turner, you old son of a gun," the man replied with a grin. "Figured you might need some help when we got word Blackburn was on the warpath." Patrick lowered his weapon, relief evident in his posture. "Your timing could have been better, but I'm not complaining." Cooper dismounted, surveying the bodies of the outlaws. "I see you've been busy." His gaze shifted to Rebecca. "And this must be Miss Anderson. We've been looking for you, madam." "You have?" Rebecca asked in surprise. "Your father's lawyer in Denver wired us when he couldn't reach you, said you might be in danger." Cooper looked at the fallen outlaws again. "Seems he was right." "Blackburn's still out there," Patrick warned. "Not anymore," Cooper replied grimly. "We caught up with him about 10 miles back, trying to cut around the mountains. He won't be troubling anyone ever again." The news should have brought Rebecca relief, but all she felt was a sudden emptiness. It was over. The danger had passed. And soon she and Patrick would part ways. As if reading her thoughts, Patrick moved closer to her. "What happens now, Cooper?" "We escort Miss Anderson to Junction City, help her file the proper paperwork for her mine, take statements about Blackburn and his gang." Cooper glanced between them, noting their proximity. "After that, it's up to her." The ride to Junction City was uneventful compared to the days preceding it. Rebecca found herself treasuring each moment of Patrick's company, aware that their time together was drawing to a close. They hadn't spoken of the kiss, or of his confession, both seemingly content to exist in this temporary space between crisis and resolution. Junction City proved to be larger and more civilized than Sweetwater, with proper streets, a courthouse, and even a small opera house. Cooper arranged for Rebecca to stay at the town's best hotel while the legal matters concerning her father's mine were sorted. Patrick accompanied her to the land office, standing silently supportive as she filed the necessary paperwork. The clerk assured her that her claim was valid and would be properly recorded. "With the deed registered and witnessed, no one can legally contest your ownership now, Miss Anderson," the clerk explained. "The Silver Creek mine is officially yours." Outside the land office, Rebecca turned to Patrick. "Thank you for everything." He nodded, his eyes betraying emotions his face tried to hide. "What will you do now? Return to Denver?" "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Part of me wants to honor my father by seeing the mine developed as he envisioned, but I know nothing about mining." "You could hire someone to manage it for you," Patrick suggested. "I could." Rebecca hesitated, then asked the question that had been weighing on her. "And you, what will you do?" Patrick glanced down the street, his expression unreadable. "Cooper offered me a deputy marshal position. Said he could use a man with my experience." Rebecca's heart sank. A federal deputy would be constantly traveling, chasing outlaws across territories. That sounds like a good opportunity. "It would be," Patrick agreed, then his eyes met hers, "but I turned him down." "You did? Why?" Patrick took a step closer. "Because it would mean leaving, and I'm not ready to do that," his voice lowered. "Not unless you want me to go." Rebecca's breath caught. "I don't want you to go," she whispered. The smile that spread across Patrick's face transformed him, erasing the hard lines of the gunfighter and revealing the man beneath. "Good. Because I was thinking I might try my hand at mining." "Mining?" Rebecca couldn't help the laugh that bubbled up. "You know about mining?" "Not a thing," he admitted cheerfully. "But I'm a fast learner, and I happen to know the owner of a promising silver mine." Rebecca's heart soared at the implication. The mine will need security as well, someone to keep the operation safe. "That I do know something about," Patrick said, his eyes never leaving hers. In that moment, on a busy street in Junction City, with people passing by and the afternoon sun warm on their faces, Rebecca felt the last piece of a puzzle fall into place. The grief for her father would never fully disappear, but alongside it now grew something new and hopeful. "Mr. Turner," she said formally, though her eyes danced with light, "would you consider a business partnership?" Patrick took her hand, bringing it to his lips in a gesture that made her blush. "Miss Anderson, I would consider much more than that, if you're willing." 6 months later, the Silver Creek mine was producing more silver than any operation in the territory. Patrick had indeed proven to be a fast learner, hiring experienced miners while providing security that kept trouble at bay. Rebecca handled the business side, discovering a talent for negotiation that surprised even herself. They made their home in a comfortable house, built halfway between the mine and the growing town that had sprung up nearby. Silver Creek, as the settlement was now known, boasted a general store, a schoolhouse, and even a small church where, on a crisp autumn day, Rebecca Anderson became Rebecca Turner. The ceremony was simple but joyful. Marshal Cooper stood as Patrick's best man, and Rebecca's aunt had traveled from Boston to represent her family. As they exchanged vows, Rebecca thought of her father, wishing he could have been there to see the man who had not only helped secure his legacy but had brought such happiness to his daughter's life. The reception was held at their home, with townsfolk and miners alike joining in the celebration. As evening approached, Rebecca found Patrick standing alone on the porch, looking out at the mountains that held the silver that had brought them together. She slipped her hand into his. "Having regrets already, Mr. Turner?" Patrick turned to her, love evident in his eyes. "Only that it took me so long to find you." Rebecca leaned into him, savoring the solid strength of the man who had become her partner in every sense of the word. "We have time now, all the time in the world." "That we do, Mrs. Turner." He wrapped his arm around her waist. "That we do." As they stood together watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson, Rebecca reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought her to this moment. A terrible loss, a desperate flight, and a chance encounter with a stranger who had become everything to her. "What are you thinking about?" Patrick asked softly. Rebecca smiled up at him. "I was just remembering the day we met, those outlaws trying to take my saddlebag, and me saying they'd leave the lady be," Patrick finished with a chuckle. "Little did I know that the lady would change my life forever." "For the better, I hope," Rebecca teased. In answer, Patrick drew her into a kiss that held all the promise of their future together, a future built on silver, yes, but more precious still, on love that had been forged in danger and had emerged stronger than any metal pulled from the earth. Over the years that followed, Silver Creek grew into a prosperous town, with the Turner name becoming synonymous with fair business practices and generosity. When silver prices eventually declined, Patrick and Rebecca had already diversified their interests, investing in cattle ranching and the railroad that now connected their town to Denver. Their family grew as well. 2 sons and a daughter filled their home with laughter and activity. Patrick proved to be a devoted father, teaching his children to ride and shoot, but also instilling in them the values of justice and compassion that had guided his own life. Rebecca continued to manage much of their business affairs, earning respect in circles typically dominated by men. She also established the town's first library, named in honor of her father, ensuring that education remained a priority in Silver Creek. On warm summer evenings, long after their children had grown and started families of their own, Patrick and Rebecca could still be found sitting together on their porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Their hands, now lined with age, would find each other as naturally as breathing. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been in Sweetwater that day?" Patrick would sometimes ask, and Rebecca would always smile and reply, "No. Because somehow I think we were always meant to find each other." In a land once ruled by lawlessness, they had built something enduring, a legacy of love that had begun with a chance encounter, a brave stand, and words that would echo through their lifetime together. "You'll leave the lady be."